Hi, today I'll be showing you how to code a simpler version of this toggle switch animation using a single checkbox and its label instead of 6 nested divs, and we'll also simplify the CSS going under 100 lines. And as far as the JavaScript is concerned, we won't be needing any of it for the basic functionality of going from one state to the other. However, we'll need to register a custom property so that we can have a smooth transition from one state to the other. But for the basic functionality, Node.js. As you can see, we already have a checkbox input here and a label for it. And this for attribute on the label allows us to couple it to the input with the same ID, so that when we click on the label, we get the action on the input happening. In this case, the action is getting checked and unchecked. Now let's maximize the CSS and let's start with doing something on the screen. So we're going to have toggle, and of course, we're not going to have that many styles on the checkbox itself, but most of them are going to be on the label, which we select using the for attribute. Okay, so having done this, okay, let's set a background here, and this is going to make the text disappear into the background. So let's do something to fix that. So first off, let's set a background on the body, and we're going to use the first color for that. Then we're going to set this background to white. Okay, now we're going to do something in terms of layout. So let's say display grid, place content, center, and then we're going to set a min height, which is going to be the full viewport height. And now that we've done this, we can just collapse the body because we won't be needing more for that. Something else I want to do is have the actual checkbox on top of the label, so that the checkbox and the label cover the exact same area and the checkbox is on top. So this is for accessibility reasons, so when we click, we actually click the checkbox. Okay, so in order to do this, we're going to have some common styles here. Alright, so first off, we're going to start with dimensions. So, but before, let's put them one on top of the other. Okay, now also for the checkbox itself, let's set a Z index too, so that we can see it on top. Okay, now I said something about the dimensions. We're going to start with the diameter of this thumb that moves left and right. So set the diameter right here, let's say 9 ems, and we're going to set the width of both elements to twice that diameter. So it's going to be twice that diameter. Okay, that doesn't work apparently. Okay, and then we're going to have height. This does work. I don't know. Okay, so now, as you can see, we're getting this, and the input and the label cover the exact same area. Okay, that's good. Next thing we want is to set a border, and this border is going to be the space around the thumb. So we're going to set a border width here, 1 em. So border, solid, that border width, and let's make it red for now. Okay, but we have a problem. So as you can see, the input doesn't get the border. The label gets it, but the input doesn't get it, and the input stays smaller. This means we need to separate these two. So we're going to take this part and we're going to put it here on the label. And for the actual checkbox, we'll be increasing the dimensions by twice the border. So here it's multiplied by 2, so we're going to add the border, and here we're going to add twice the border width. Okay, so now once more, the input on top covered the exact same area as the label. Next step is to give it a rounding, so we're going to use border radius. First off, we're going to compute the radius of that thumb, which is going to be half the diameter. So 0.5 times the diameter. So border radius is going to be that radius plus the border width. So now you can see it's exactly half. And let's hide the text. Let's set overflow hidden so that the text doesn't go out. Okay. And now I'd like to point out a problem that we have. As you can see, if we click here, the checkbox gets checked and unchecked. But also if we click here outside the rounding, it still gets checked while it's within that rectangle. So the solution here is to use clip path with the inset function. And if you don't know how the inset function works for clip path, it's basically like this. It takes up to 4 values, but it can also take 3, 2, or 1. It's pretty much like the inset property, which can also take 4, 3, 2, 1 values. And they're exactly the same. They go clockwise, just like there. And by the way, I'll be linking both these two resources in the description, and you can check them out. So basically here we have the offsets from the edges of the border box going clockwise, starting from the top. But the inset function can also have a second part, which is the rounding, which can take the exact same value that border radius can. So let me show you. We're going to have clip path, and the offsets are going to be 0. So inset, all offsets are going to be 0, and then we're going to have the round part, and then the exact same radius as we set for the border radius. So now when we click here outside, you can see that it doesn't get checked. And again, if you click outside, it doesn't get unchecked. We have to click inside. So within the edges of the border area, we get this checkbox to change value, but outside, even if we're still within the rectangle, nothing happens. Okay, so that's good. Next thing we want here is to make the background more interesting and add a radial gradient. So this is going to be closest side, and CodePen doesn't autocomplete that. We'll use the first color and then transparent. And the reason we're using closest side is that so 100% is not at the corner of the background size rectangle, is on the edge, on the closest edge. Okay, so we're not really seeing much at this point because we have this checkbox on top. So we're going to set opacity 0 on it. And now we're starting to see something, but again, it's not too obvious. As you can see, now it's more obvious. So the thing is, we need to restrict it to half horizontally. So we're going to place it at 0, and we're going to give it a width that's half. So basically we can do 50%, right? It's going to work just the same, but we don't want it to repeat, so we're going to have no repeat. So this looks nice so far. And then, of course, we want this to move, so we can use calc, and this is going to be a switch custom property I, which we multiply with 100%. And in the non-checked state, this is going to be 0, so it's going to take the value 0. And then in the checked state, let's we're going to have checked. We're going to make I become 1. And having done this, you can see that when I click, okay, something else, let's get rid of that text altogether and make it non-clickable, non-selectable. So color, transparent, and user select, none. Oh, and something else I want to do is here set cursor pointer, because it annoys me to just go on top and sorry. Yay. So now it works nicely, and we can take out this red, so replace it with transparent, and this means we can also take out the border radius, right? Okay, next thing we want is to change the color, because as you can see it goes to a blue in the checked state, and the blue is that second color we have right here. And this whole switching thing is explained in this article that I wrote on dry switching with custom properties. So this actually explains how you switch to have one color in one state to another color in another state. Okay, so you can see it here. The on and off switch goes from one color to the other. And I'm using the HSL format here, but it works just as well for RGB, and this is what I'll be using in the example. So here I'll be creating a custom property, which is going to be an RGB value, which combines the two values, the first color and the second one. So here I'll have a second custom property, which is not I, and this is a calc 1 minus I. So when I is 0, not I is going to be 1, and when I is 1, not I is going to be 0. So again, this is explained in this logical operations with CSS variables, and again, all the resources are going to be linked in the description. You can find them there. So here what I'll be doing is have not I multiplied with the red component of the first color, so red component of the first color, and then I'm going to add up, so it's going to be something very similar. So I is going to get multiplied with the red component of the second color, and then I'm going to take almost this whole thing, so the entire calc part, and have almost the same thing for the other two channels, so for the green and now for the blue. So as I said, this is going to be green, sorry, oh, I can't select stuff, green, blue. Okay, now having done this, I'll be using this custom property right here. So now when I click, as you can see, it changes. One thing I don't really like is we have a bit of a jagged edge there, and in order to fix it, we'll be using a calc here. So calc 100% minus 1 pixel, and this is going to be by default at 100%, so I'm going to have 1 pixel there, so it's going to get smoothed out a bit. Okay, this is nice. Now this toggle switch was inspired by this dribble, where you can also see that we have a shadow in the checked state, and we're going to achieve that with a second gradient, which is going to go underneath. So it's going to be a very similar radial gradient, which is going to go underneath, and it's going to have also a vertical offset, which let's say it's going to be equal to that border width. Okay, and this is also, it's always going to use that color, the shadow color, and this is not going to be there, it's going to be at 65%, for example. And again, I'm going to add an offset horizontally as well, so it's going to be something like that. And of course we don't want it in this state as well, so here I'll be using an RGBA where the alpha is that I custom property, the switch custom property. So now you can see we don't have the shadow in this state, but we do have it in the checked state. Now for the X, which turns into a check mark. Now for that, we'll be using pseudo elements. So we're going to use before and an after. Okay, and again we'll be using display grid here, and we need to keep in mind, let's take that one out. We need to keep in mind the fact that here we also have the text content. So content nothing. So this is going to put the toggle there, and we have 3 items, the before, the after, and the text content on this grid, and we want both the before and the after to be in the first grid cell. So grid area, and what we'll want to have is to have 1 row and 2 columns. So grid template, 1 row and 2 equal columns. So this is going to push the text into the second column. Let me show you. So you can see that we have 2 columns, 1 row and 2 columns. Okay, now here I'm going to set the width equal to that diameter, and the height, we're going to have another computed value here. So the height, let's say, is going to be half the border width. It can be something else, but I don't know, this seems simpler. Okay, so the height, like that. Let's set the background. Okay, we're also going to set place self center. Okay, and then something else we want to do here is set a transform, and here we'll have translate, and again we'll have a calc, and here we're going to have I times 100%, and this 100% is 100% of its own dimension along the axis we're translating. This is a translation along the x-axis, so this is going to be 100% of the width. So now if I do something like this, you can see that the pseudo elements move along. Next we're going to have a rotation, so rotate. So we can say something like 45 degrees, but we want one at 45 degrees and the other one at minus 45 degrees. So we're going to introduce a second custom property, so this is going to be something like a j, which is going to be 0 initially, and then we switch it on the after. We switch j to 1. Okay, having done this, we can also compute something like a sine of j, and this is calc 2 times j minus 1. So if j is 0, this is going to give us minus 1, and if j is 1, this is going to give us 1. So basically here what we do is add calc and multiply this with the sine of j. So one is going to get rotated one way and the other one the other way. Yay! Now make this background white. Uncomment that. Okay, now we also want, as you can see here, we have a rotation. So it's like by half a full turn, right? So here we're also going to have I times half a turn. So now I'm not seeing this animated. That's the problem. So let's solve that problem. So register property, and we're going to register that I. So name is I, syntax, so this is the type, number, and then we're going to have something like initial value 0, and then inherits true, because we want the value to be inherited from the label to its pseudo elements. Okay, what did I mess up here? Yeah, you are messed up. Oh, come on. Yeah, it should update soon. So here, transition, something like this. Okay, and now, okay, I need to set the transition on the actual label, not on the pseudo elements. So it should be here. And now it should work. And you can see we're getting that rotation and the smooth motion. That's cool. Now the next thing we want is to make that x smaller, and we're not going to use scale because that is going to affect the roundings of the ends. We're going to use clip path. So clip path, and again we're going to use inset, and the inset is going to be 0 vertically, but horizontally, let's say for now, let's say it's going to be something like a border width, and the rounding, well, it's gonna get whatever, right? So now you can see that this is smaller, like this. Which is nice, isn't it? Okay, now we also want this offset, the lateral offset, to change in between the two states. So first off, we're going to use a custom property here, and this is going to be, we're going to have first the non-checked state. So we're going to have the non-checked state, so this is going to be not I multiplied with the value we want for the non-checked state. So for example, it's going to be like this, right? And then we're going to have the value for the checked state, I, where we're going to multiply with something different. So for example, 2 times that border width. Those are not going to be the values we use, but just for simplicity now, you can see that it becomes smaller. But we only want one of them to become smaller, right? So we're going to need to have 2 situations here. So we're not going to have just one situation. We're going to have 2 situations. So for not j, we're going to have one value, and for the other one we're going to have a different value. Okay, so yeah, something got messed up there. Okay. Yeah, we haven't defined not j yet, so that's the problem. So it's going to be 1 minus j. That's all the problem that there is. Okay, so, okay, and here, no, we're going to have to align stuff properly like this. Okay, so first off, we're going to decide upon an offset. So let's say we're going to have an offset for the smaller one. Let's put it somewhere here. So this is going to be, yeah, actually the other way around we'll want them to be. So this is going to be the smaller one, the shorter one, and this is going to be the longer one. Okay. Something like this. And then we're going to have a mid part, right? And this is going to be the diameter minus twice that offset, because you have an offset from one side and offset from the other side, and then we're left with the middle. Okay, so now this is going to be that offset. Okay, that looks nice. And for the other one, let's see what we want in terms of offset. Let's say we're going to want three times the height, 3 times, something like this. So here we're going to have the other offset. Okay, and here let's make it twice. Okay, so now when we move this, okay, it looks a lot better, but we also need to move these bars so that they form a check mark in the checked state. So we do this with another translation right here. So translate, and here horizontally we're only going to translate the short one, and that one is going to be the J one, the after. So we're only going to have this translation in the checked state, and we're only going to have it for the after, for which J is 1. And this is going to be, so in total we're going to need to have a translation of half that mid part, because they intersect in the middle, and we need to move that short one so that they intersect at the end. So we need to move it by half. But we're only going to move this bar horizontally by half, and then we're going to move the other bar, we're going to move it vertically by the other half. So basically it's going to be half of the middle, so that's going to be 0.25. So 0.25, so 0.5 times 0.5 of the middle. Okay, and for the other part, for the y-axis, we're going to have again another calc, and again it all happens for the checked state, except here we have 2 components. So one is the long bar, the before, which is going to be not J. And this one is going to be times the same value as here, only in the other direction. So it's going to be minus. Okay, and now we're going to want to also translate this part right here. So we're going to want to translate it. So it's going to be J times that other offset minus the radius. So okay, and we also need to add 50% of its height. Okay, so that looks nice. Okay, So let's align stuff nicely, like this. So yeah, we basically have the end result right now. It looks like we wanted it to. And of course, we can tweak the timing function. So I'm not exactly sure. Do I have a transition here? Yeah, it's ease here as well. There's no, yeah, is the default, and ease is the default, so we're not getting anything else. It's just a faster transition as far as I can tell. So yeah, but that's pretty much it. So I'll just leave it like this because that uses the ease transition function as well. So yeah, this is what I wanted to show you for today. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you like the work that I've been putting out for more than 8 years now, you can support it by being a cool cat and becoming a patron on Patreon, or you can get me something off my Amazon wish list, or you can at least share this to show the world what can be done with CSS these days. In any event, thanks for watching, and until next time.